It began in the smoke of a dying world, where the ruins of war whispered through the silence. The Valari homeworld had once been a paradise of crystal cities and silver rivers, but now, only fire and dust remained. The Galactic Council had called it a necessary act of containment. Humanity called it liberation. But neither word fit the sight before Captain Elias Ward. Burned fields, broken spires, and the echo of 1,000 voices that would never speak again. The Council's war had ended, but the guilt remained. Humanity had been the blade that ended the Valari rebellion, and Elias, a soldier of Earth's Peace Corps, had followed orders without question. Until that day, the day he saw her, the moment that tore him away from obedience forever. Amid the debris, a scream broke the stillness, raw and full of fear. "Please, she's only 5. Take me instead." He turned toward the sound and saw a blue-skinned woman kneeling in the ash, clutching a small child to her chest as a drone soldier aimed its weapon. The mother's eyes, silver and wet with terror, met his, and something ancient and human flared in him. Compassion. Elias stepped forward, his boots crunching through the burnt soil. The drone's targeting light moved across the woman's trembling face, but Elias raised his hand. "Stand down," he ordered sharply. The drone hesitated, then retracted its weapon. "Captain," his comm officer protested through static, "those are unauthorized survivors. Orders are to cleanse the area." Elias ignored him. The little girl's eyes were bright like molten sapphire, filled with innocence that no war should have to understand. "You're safe now," he said softly. The woman's lips trembled, her voice barely a whisper. Why would a human spare us? He didn't know how to answer. He only knew that he couldn't let the galaxy's cruelty take another child. In that moment, the line between species vanished. The war was no longer about conquest, it was about decency. What he didn't know was that his act of mercy had just defied the entire Galactic Council, and that every ship in orbit would soon turn its weapons toward him. He brought them aboard his shuttle under false authorization, hiding them among the supply crates. The woman's name was Arya, and her daughter, Lyra, barely spoke above a whisper. As the engines roared to life, Elias caught his reflection in the viewport, a human soldier breaking his own code to protect an alien mother and child. He knew the punishment. Death by tribunal, stripped of rank and erased from the records. But when he looked at them, he couldn't bring himself to care. Arya sat silently across from him, her eyes reflecting the hum of the control lights. "You'll be hunted," she said quietly. "They don't forgive humans who disobey." "Then I'll make sure they never find us," he replied. She studied him for a long time, as if searching for weakness, then whispered, "You sound like one of us." He almost smiled. Maybe that's the problem. The journey through space was long and silent. The stars drifted past like ghosts, and for the first time, Elias felt the weight of what it meant to be human. Not a warrior, not a conqueror, but a protector. He learned about Arya's world, about the Council's lie. The Valari hadn't started the rebellion. They'd begged for peace after centuries of exploitation. Humanity, desperate to prove loyalty to the Council, had crushed them. It wasn't a war. It was an extermination. The truth left Elias sick with shame. Yet when he looked at Arya tending to her sleeping daughter, he saw strength, not hatred. "You still think we're monsters?" he asked one night. She shook her head. "No," she said softly. "You just forgot what you were fighting for." Her words stayed with him long after she fell asleep. When they reached the outer rim, Elias sent a false signal, pretending to have perished in atmospheric re-entry. The Galactic Council declared him dead, closing the file. But rumors began to spread, whispers of a human captain gone rogue, of an alien mother and child seen traveling through the unclaimed zones. To the Council, he was a traitor. To the survivors of Valera, he was a myth, the human guardian. Together, they hid in the shadows of abandoned colonies, moving from one derelict outpost to another. Arya, once broken, grew strong again, and somewhere along the line, strength turned into something else. One night, while the child slept, she looked at Elias across the campfire's flickering light. "You risked your life for us. Why?" He hesitated, then said, "Because no one ever did that for me." Her gaze softened. "You humans confuse me. You destroy everything you touch. But when you love, you'd burn worlds to keep it safe." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what makes us dangerous. But peace never lasts." A Valari bounty signal reached the wrong hands. Within days, a council frigate appeared on long-range sensors, tracking their ship. Elias and Arya stood side by side in the control room, the stars flashing red with warning lights. "They found us," she said. "Then we finish what we started," he replied. He turned to her, his voice low but steady. "You need to take Lyra and get to the escape pods." "No," she said fiercely. "I won't lose you too." The words caught him off guard. For the first time, he realized how much she meant to him, not as someone he'd saved, but as someone who'd saved him in return. The alarms wailed louder. The frigate opened fire, plasma beams tearing through the void. The ship shuddered, power flickering. Elias looked at Arya and whispered, "If we survive this, I want to see what a world looks like when it's not burning." She reached for his hand, her voice trembling. "Then don't die before you show me." The final battle was chaos. The council ship's cannons ripped through their defenses, but Elias fought with the ferocity of every soldier who had ever regretted his orders. The human in him, the part that refused to surrender, awakened something ancient inside the Valari mother too. Together, they turned their small ship into a storm of light, evading, striking, surviving. When the council commander demanded their surrender, Elias opened the comm channel. "You call us traitors," he said, "but you forgot who we are. We're human. We don't surrender." He cut the transmission and overloaded the reactor, channeling the blast into the frigate's core. The explosion lit the void like dawn, consuming both ships in a flood of fire. When the light faded, silence returned to the stars. Weeks later, a salvage team found only fragments of metal drifting through the nebula, and a single escape pod, carrying a sleeping child. Records later told of a small colony on the edge of the Andromeda Gate where a young girl grew up hearing stories of a human who defied the council to save her people. They said the stars themselves seemed to glow brighter when she looked at them, as if someone, somewhere, was still watching over her. And though no one could ever prove what became of Captain Elias Ward and Arya of Valera, the galaxy remembered their defiance. In the archives of 1,000 worlds, the story was retold, of the day humanity stepped forward, not as conquerors but as guardians. And as the story spread through space, the final line was always the same. She pleaded for her child's life, but humanity answered. The days following the rescue were restless and tense. Captain Elias Ward's shuttle drifted through deep space under stealth mode, its engines dimmed to hide from council sensors. The stars outside looked distant and cold, like silent witnesses to his betrayal. He had defied the Galactic Council, violated every standing order, and risked his own execution, all for a woman and child he barely knew. Yet as he sat in the co-pilot's seat, watching the faint reflection of Arya holding her sleeping daughter in the rear compartment, he knew he would do it again without hesitation. Her quiet breathing was the only sound in the cabin. Even in the low red light, he could see the bruises along her arms, the burns on her shoulders, signs of the council's merciless purges. She had refused medical aid at first, but he'd insisted. "You're safe now," he had told her. But he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. Every passing hour stretched thin with fear of discovery, of running out of power, of what the galaxy would do to them if caught. When Arya finally stirred, she spoke in a low, melodic tone that didn't belong in a world of war. "You shouldn't have done this," she whispered. "They'll kill you for it." Elias looked at her through the dim glow of the console. "Then they'll have to find me first." She shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. The council doesn't chase, it erases. They'll rewrite your name from history. To them, you'll never have existed." He gave a half-smile. "Then maybe it's time they forgot the wrong people." Her gaze softened, studying the human sitting before her, battle-hardened, tired, yet still defiant. "You sound like a Valari," she said quietly. "That's supposed to be an insult where I'm from," he replied. Her lips curved faintly, the closest thing to a smile he had seen from her yet. Then maybe your world needs more insults. As the ship slipped past the silent orbit of a shattered moon, Elias checked the scanners again. No pursuit yet, just static. Still, he knew better than to trust silence. The Galactic Council was not an enemy that forgot. They were a machine built on fear, order, and obedience, everything he had been raised to follow. Yet Aria's presence had cracked that foundation. He couldn't stop thinking about the moment he saw her kneeling in the ashes, holding her child. No soldier would forget that kind of plea, the voice that stripped war of its justifications. He had seen comrades die for glory, others for greed, but never for compassion. That was what made humanity dangerous. They could destroy, but they could also defy destruction. Arya watched him from the back, sensing his unease. "You were part of their army," she said softly. "Why save me?" Elias leaned back in his seat, staring at the starlight flickering past. "Because I saw too much of myself in you. The same fear, the same loss. And the same anger?" she asked. He paused before answering. "Maybe, but I don't want to live angry anymore." For a long while they said nothing. The child, Lyra, stirred in her sleep, murmuring words in a language Elias couldn't understand. Aria's fingers brushed the little girl's cheek gently, a small act of love that felt too fragile for a galaxy built on hate. "Your people don't understand love," she said finally. "They see it as weakness." "Not all of us," he said. "Some of us still believe it's what makes us human." "And what does it make us?" she asked, her silver eyes glinting. He looked at her quietly and said, "Alive." They stopped on a forgotten mining station along the fringe of the Orion Belt, a hollow shell orbiting a dying red star. It was an outlaw's refuge, the kind of place the council pretended didn't exist. Inside, old metal creaked under the weight of decades, and flickering lights painted the corridors in amber and shadow. Elias guided them to a storage bay, shutting down the engines before the sensors could catch the ship's trace. "We'll stay here for a while," he said. "Long enough for the council to move on." Arya hesitated at the hatch, looking around at the rusted walls. "You trust this place?" "No," he said plainly. "But it's the only corner of the galaxy that doesn't trust anyone else either." That somehow comforted her. As hours turned into days, their fragile alliance became something deeper. Arya, once silent and withdrawn, began to speak of her world, of Valera Prime's oceans that glowed with bioluminescent light, of cities carved into glass mountains, of songs her people sang to their children when storms came. She spoke of how the Galactic Council stripped it all away, claiming the Valari had defied the harmony laws. In truth, they had merely wanted freedom. Elias listened, feeling the weight of her pain, knowing that humanity had been the Council's weapon that enforced that suffering. One night, as they sat near a small heat coil, Arya asked, "Do you regret saving us?" He looked up from the flickering light. "No, regret comes from doing nothing. I'd rather die for something I believe in than live under a flag I don't." She stared into the glow, her voice trembling. "My mate said something like that once. They killed him for it." The silence between them grew heavy. "I'm sorry," Elias said quietly. "You don't have to be," she whispered. "You didn't kill him." But her tone softened, and her gaze drifted toward him. "You're nothing like the others. When you look at me, you don't see a monster." "That's because I've seen real monsters," he said. "And none of them looked like you." The words hung between them, fragile, dangerous, and real. She turned away, but he saw the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes. By the fourth night, the outpost's old systems began to fail. Oxygen scrubbers flickered. The hum of the engines faded. They had to move again. But before they could leave, a transmission came through the static, an encrypted council beacon triangulating positions across the sector. They were closing in. Elias cursed under his breath and ran diagnostics. "They found the signal trail," he muttered. Arya stepped closer, tension in her voice. "How long until they reach us?" "Too soon," he said. "We need to go now." She grabbed his arm. "If they catch you with me, They'll kill you too. He looked at her, his voice steady. Then we'll die together. She froze, the weight of his words sinking in. You'd do that? For us? He nodded once. For what's right. Her eyes searched his face. For fear, for doubt, for hesitation, and found none. Then, slowly, she whispered, You humans. You really don't know how to let go. No, he said. And that's why we always win. With that, he started the engines. The old station shook as their ship rose through the dust and fire, engines roaring back to life. The stars waited beyond the metal sky, endless, cold, and free. As they broke orbit, Arya looked at him with a mix of awe and sorrow. Elias, she said softly, whatever happens next, I won't forget you. He met her gaze, his voice quiet but firm. Then let's make sure there's something worth remembering. As they vanished into the deep black of space, the first wave of council ships arrived behind them. Too late. In the silence that followed, a single transmission echoed across the void, captured by a dozen listening posts and pirate relays. It was a human voice, calm and defiant, carrying one simple message. Compassion isn't rebellion. It's the one thing that makes us worth saving. It spread through the channels like wildfire, whispered across planets, debated in council chambers, and remembered long after the war ended. And somewhere, in the endless dark, a human and an alien mother sailed between the stars, fugitives to some, heroes to others, proving that even in the cold vacuum of space, humanity's heart still burned bright. The stars beyond the Orion belt shimmered faintly as the stolen vessel slipped deeper into the dark expanse. Every flicker of light outside the viewport felt like a reminder of pursuit, a reminder that peace was a fragile illusion. Days blurred into one another, and Captain Elias Ward began to lose sense of time. The hum of the ship was constant, its recycled air dry and heavy. Arya and her daughter Lyra had found a rhythm of quiet living, tucked away in the rear compartment, while Elias remained in the cockpit, eyes fixed on the stars. He couldn't stop replaying her words. They'll erase you. Maybe she was right. Maybe by now, the Galactic Council had already wiped his name from their records, deleted his past, his existence. But even if history forgot him, he refused to forget what he saw. A mother's plea, a child's fear, and a war built on lies. The longer he spent away from command, the more truth he uncovered. The Council had orchestrated the destruction of Valera not because of rebellion, but because they feared what the Valari had discovered. A power that didn't belong to them. Something ancient, something human. The clues came slowly. A half-burned data pad recovered from an abandoned relay station carried fragments of restricted information, classified by the Council centuries ago. There were references to Project Halo, a human-engineered program that sought to create hybrid soldiers capable of surviving in hostile alien environments. The Valari weren't a natural species at all. They were descendants of early human colonists, altered beyond recognition by genetic experiments meant to build a perfect race. When the project was shut down, the survivors fled, hiding among the stars. They became something new, something beautiful, until the Council found them and feared their evolution. Elias stared at the glowing text on the datapad, his breath shallow. You were never the enemy, he whispered. You were the proof. When Arya entered the cockpit, she found him pale, his hands trembling around the pad. What's wrong? She asked. He handed it to her silently. She read the words, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief, and finally to heartbreak. No, she whispered. This can't be true. It is, he said quietly. The Council erased your history. You weren't conquered, you were abandoned. She sank into the chair beside him, staring out into the blackness beyond. All this time, I thought we were the cursed ones, that we were punished for our defiance. Her voice cracked, but we were just forgotten. Elias looked at her, his tone heavy. They didn't just forget. They erased you so no one would know what they did. For a long time she said nothing, only watched the stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Then what are we now? He looked at her and said, maybe what we were meant to be all along, human. The words hit her harder than she expected. Her people had despised the word human for generations, associating it with war, greed, and betrayal. But coming from him, it sounded different, like a promise, something fragile but hopeful. That night, while Lyra slept, Arya sat by the viewport, the reflection of distant galaxies glowing in her eyes. Elias joined her quietly, bringing 2 cups of rehydrated tea. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was shared. "I used to think humans were heartless," she said softly. "That your species fought because it couldn't feel." Elias took a sip of his drink and said, "We fight because we feel too much. We just forget what we're fighting for." She turned toward him, her silver eyes shining faintly in the dim light. "And what are you fighting for now?" He met her gaze and answered without hesitation. "You." She looked away quickly, as if the word itself was too much to bear. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "I've already cost you everything." He smiled faintly. "You didn't cost me anything. You gave me a reason to stop being a weapon." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy and raw. For the first time, she didn't argue. She simply looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the soldier who burned her world, but the man who had chosen mercy over command. For the first time since the fall of Valera, she felt safe. But safety never lasts. A transmission crackled through the static. Faint, distorted, but unmistakable. "Captain Elias Ward," a mechanical voice said, "you are charged with insurrection and treason against the Galactic Council. Your vessel is being tracked. Surrender now, and your death will be merciful." Elias froze, his pulse quickening. "They found us." Arya's expression hardened. "Then we run." He activated the ship's stealth thrusters, diving into the shadows of a nearby asteroid field. The ship rattled violently as debris scraped the hull. "Hold on," he shouted. The child woke, crying out in fear, but Arya held her tightly, whispering calming words in her native tongue. The Council's drones swept through the field like predators, their sensors scanning for movement. Elias cut power and dimmed all lights, letting the ship drift silently among the rocks. For hours, they hid in the silence, surrounded by drifting stone and cold vacuum. When the last drone finally vanished from the radar, Arya let out a trembling breath. "You risked your life for us again," she said. "That's what humans do," he replied softly. "We make stupid, brave choices and hope they mean something." She smiled faintly, exhaustion in her eyes. "You're not like the others." "Neither are you," he said, and for a long moment, they just sat there, 2 lost souls bound by defiance and something deeper neither dared name. In the following days, their bond grew unspoken but undeniable. Arya began to laugh again, quietly at first, then freely when Lyra played in the cargo hold, chasing a small holographic bird Elias had programmed for her. Watching them, he felt something stir inside him that had been buried for years: warmth. Humanity wasn't in the fleets or the Council's orders. It was in the simple act of protecting what was good. One evening, as the artificial night cycle dimmed, Arya sat across from him, her expression soft. "You humans, you love in strange ways, fierce and fragile at once." He looked up at her, smiling faintly. "It's the only thing that keeps us from losing ourselves." "And if you lose me?" she asked quietly. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Then I lose what made me human." That night, something shifted. The air between them was thick with unspoken feeling. The ship hummed softly, the stars moving like slow rivers of light beyond the glass. For the first time, she reached out and placed her hand on his, tentative, unsure, but real. His fingers closed around hers, and for a fleeting moment, all the chaos of the galaxy disappeared. There was only her touch, warm, trembling, alive. But beyond that small moment of peace, the storm was already building. For in the depths of the Council's archives, a single order had been signed by the High Chancellor herself: recover or terminate the fugitives. Retrieve the child alive. And so, the hunt began anew, The silence of the void broke when the Council's fleet crossed into the Vega corridor. Their ships moved like a storm, vast, gleaming, relentless, chasing the faint trail of a single human vessel. The order was absolute. Capture the child, eliminate the traitor, erase the alien mother. Meanwhile, far from the polished halls of the Galactic Council, Elias Ward's small ship drifted on the edge of known space, hidden between the twin moons of a dying star. Inside the cabin, the glow of the consoles flickered dimly, casting soft amber light on faces carved with fatigue and uncertainty. The hum of the engines had grown faint. Their fuel reserves were low. It had been days since the last transmission, but Elias knew they were being hunted. The galaxy was too quiet for comfort. Arya sat near the sleeping child, her expression unreadable. Her silver eyes reflected the faint glimmer of starlight through the viewport. Elias leaned against the bulkhead, arms folded, exhaustion in every line of his face. "You haven't slept," she said without looking at him. He smirked faintly. "Neither have you." "I don't need to," she replied, though her tone betrayed her. "You forget. I'm not human." He took a step closer. "No," he said softly. "You're something better." Her gaze flicked toward him, sharp at first, then softer. "You say that because you don't know what we've done," she whispered. "You think my people were victims, but the Council didn't fear us without reason." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" Arya hesitated before continuing, her voice trembling slightly. "Before they destroyed our world, the Valari had begun to remember who they were, what they were made from. We found traces of the first humans, the ones who came before your kind, the ones who built us. We inherited their strength, their emotions, but not their restraint. The Council feared that if the Valari ever remembered their origin, we'd rise again." Elias looked at her, realization dawning. "So they destroyed you before you could become what they feared." She nodded slowly. "And now, I carry what remains of that legacy. Lyra carries it too." He stared at the sleeping child, small and peaceful, unaware of the fate that hunted her. "What makes her so important?" Arya's voice lowered, almost reverent. "Lyra was born with a trait that hasn't existed for millennia, empathy strong enough to connect across minds. The Council saw it as a threat. They feared she could undo their control by making others feel again." Elias's breath caught. A child who could teach an empire to feel? She met his gaze and whispered, "A child who could remind the galaxy what it means to be human." The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Elias said quietly, "We can't hide forever. Sooner or later, they'll find us." "Then we run again," she said. "No," he replied, straightening. "We fight." The ship's sensors suddenly came alive, beeping urgently. "Contact," Elias muttered, rushing to the console. A cluster of red dots appeared on the screen. Fast, converging. "They found us." Arya's pulse quickened. "How many?" "Too many." The ship shuddered as the first plasma round struck the hull. The lights flickered, alarms blaring through the corridors. "Elias," she shouted. "They're hailing us." He gritted his teeth. "Ignore it. If we don't respond, they'll destroy us." "They'll destroy us anyway," he snapped. She fell silent, watching him move, calm, focused, commanding. For the first time, she understood why humans had survived so long. They were chaos wrapped in courage. He dove into the pilot seat, hands flying over controls. "I can outmaneuver them in the asteroid field ahead," he said. "If we can survive the next few minutes." The ship lurched violently, metal groaning as another blast hit. Arya shielded Lyra with her body, whispering soothing words. The child clung to her, eyes wide with fear. "Hold on," Elias shouted. He pulled the ship hard to the left, engines roaring as they plunged into the debris field. Massive rocks and shattered planetary fragments drifted in all directions, glowing faintly in the dying light of the twin suns. Plasma fire streaked past, lighting the darkness with violent flashes. The ship twisted and rolled between the asteroids, its hull scraping against stone. One of the rear thrusters failed, sending sparks across the cockpit. "We're losing power," Arya cried. "I know," Elias shouted back. "Rerouting auxiliary systems." The sound of their pursuers filled the comms, a cold, mechanical voice announcing, "This is the Galactic Council Enforcement Fleet. Power down immediately. The fugitives will be terminated. The child will be extracted." Elias slammed a hand against the console, muting the signal. "They're not taking her," he growled. "Not while I'm still breathing." "They'll kill you for this," Arya said. "They already did," he replied grimly. A massive asteroid loomed ahead, its surface riddled with caverns. "There," he pointed. "If we can reach those tunnels, we can lose them." The ship dived into the largest opening, engines screaming. The passage was narrow, the walls scraping close. Behind them, Council ships fired blindly into the dark, explosions echoing through the caverns. Inside the hollow asteroid, the chase slowed. The gravity was unstable, pulling the ship downward. "We can't stay here long," Arya warned. "The core is collapsing." "We just need a few minutes," Elias said. He brought the ship to a rough landing on a flat ledge. Dust and debris filled the air. For a moment, everything was silent except the hum of cooling engines. Arya turned to him, her face pale. "What now?" He looked at her, determination burning in his eyes. "Now we make sure they never use her against anyone again." "You can't fight an entire fleet," she said. "Watch me." He opened a maintenance panel, revealing the power core, unstable but intact. "If we overload it and detonate from inside this asteroid, the blast will collapse the field around us and take their ships with it." "That will kill you," she whispered. "It'll kill all of us." He looked at her calmly. "Not if you and Lyra get out first." "I'm not leaving you," she said firmly. "You will," he insisted. "She's the future, Arya. You're her mother. You have to protect her." Her voice broke. "You protect her too." He smiled faintly. "I already did." She grabbed his arm, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Elias, don't do this. There has to be another way." He looked at her, voice soft but unyielding. "There's always another way. This is mine." For a long moment, she stared at him, trembling between fury and heartbreak. Then, without a word, she pressed her forehead to his, her voice breaking. "If there's another life after this, find me there." His hand brushed her cheek. "I will." She kissed him once, fierce and desperate, before pulling away and running toward the escape pods with Lyra in her arms. Elias stayed behind, watching the small pod detach and vanish into the void. Then he turned back to the controls, entering the final sequence. Outside, the council ships closed in, surrounding the asteroid. The commander's voice came through once more. "You've lost, human. Surrender." Elias smiled faintly, his voice low but steady. "You still don't understand humanity. We don't surrender. Not when there's something worth saving." He pressed the final command. The power core surged, light filling the cavern. From space, the explosion looked like a new sun being born. A wave of fire swallowing the fleet, then fading into silence. The asteroid field was gone, reduced to drifting dust and ash. In its place, the stars burned quietly again. Far away, aboard the tiny escape pod, Arya held Lyra close as the shockwave passed. Her tears floated weightless, glimmering like stars. "He kept his promise," she whispered. Lyra looked up at her, small voice trembling. "Where did the human go?" Arya smiled through her tears. "He became the light, my child. The light that will guide us home." And in the depths of space, the sensors of forgotten satellites caught one last signal. A human voice carried through static and time. "Humanity endures." For 3 long days after the explosion, space was silent. The debris field where the asteroid once existed drifted in stillness, glowing faintly like embers of a long-dead fire. The Galactic Council declared victory. A fugitive destroyed, the threat neutralized. The official report said Captain Elias Ward died as a traitor to his species, and the alien mother and child were presumed vaporized in the blast. The truth, however, was different. Beyond the edges of the Vega corridor, a small escape pod drifted quietly through the dark. The signal beacon was disabled, its power low, but inside, life persisted. Arya of Valera sat by the viewport, her arms wrapped tightly around Lyra as the child slept against her chest. The faint hum of the pod was all that remained of the man who had saved them. She could still smell the faint trace of his jacket draped around her shoulders, still hear his voice, calm, strong, human, echoing in her memory. "We don't surrender." Those words had become her heartbeat. Outside the pod, the universe stretched in endless silence. Arya didn't know where they were. The navigation system had been damaged during the escape. She was running on instinct now, trusting that somehow, the stars themselves would guide her where she needed to go. Every few hours, Lyra would wake and ask softly, "Where's Elias?" And every time, Arya would answer the same way, her voice breaking, "He's watching the stars, little one. He's keeping us safe." But inside, she felt hollow. The man she had once hated, the human she had sworn to distrust, had become her protector, her salvation, and something she dared not name aloud. He had become proof that even among the species that destroyed her world, kindness could still bloom like light in the dark. The days blurred into an ache of hunger and exhaustion until the pod's sensors finally caught something. A faint beacon from a derelict station orbiting a dead world. Arya guided the pod manually, landing with a metallic thud in an abandoned hangar. The place was a graveyard, cold, empty, and silent. The air smelled of rust and memory. She carried Lyra through the corridors, the child's small fingers gripping her tightly. The lights flickered dimly, powered by what little energy remained in the station's core. "We'll rest here," she whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it. She found a chamber with working life support, laid her daughter down, and sank to her knees beside her. For the first time since the explosion, she allowed herself to cry. "You promised you'd find me," she whispered into the emptiness. "You said you'd come back." The only answer was the hum of the failing lights. Then, on the fourth night, something changed. A faint vibration trembled through the station floor. Arya froze, her instincts sharpening. She rushed to the control console, eyes scanning the readouts. A ship, small, unmarked, was approaching from the far edge of the system. Her breath caught in her throat. "No," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "Not them." She hurried to seal the doors, pulling Lyra into her arms. The ship docked with a metallic thud, and heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Then, through the fog of the docking hatch, a voice, deep, human, called out, "Arya." She froze, her heart stopping for a moment. Couldn't be. She had seen the explosion with her own eyes. It had lit the sky like a dying sun. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." But then she heard it again, closer now, steady, familiar. "Arya, it's me." The door hissed open, and through the mist stepped a figure she knew too well. His armor was scarred, his uniform tattered, but his eyes, those unmistakable human eyes, still burned with the same quiet fire. "Elias," she breathed. Her knees weakened, and for a moment, she forgot how to move. He stood before her, alive against all reason, his hand outstretched. "Told you," he said softly, a faint smile curving his lips. "Humans are hard to kill." She took a step forward, tears spilling freely now. "How?" "I saw you." He shook his head. "I overloaded the core, yes, but I ejected just before it blew. The shockwave threw my pod into the outer ring. Took me days to find a signal. And you." She stared at him in disbelief. "You came back." He stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. "I said I would." For the first time since the war began, Arya broke. Not in fear, but in relief. She collapsed against him, her sobs shaking her slender frame. His arms wrapped around her, strong and steady. "You shouldn't have come," she said through tears. "They'll hunt you again." "Let them," he whispered. "They can't take from me what I already gave you." "And what was that?" she asked, looking up at him. He smiled faintly. My choice. She couldn't find words. Only silence, thick with everything they had endured. Lyra stirred and blinked sleepily. When she saw Elias, her small face lit up. You came back, she said softly. He knelt, smiling. I promised your mother I would, and I always keep my promises. The little girl threw her arms around his neck, and for a moment, the cold, empty station felt alive again. But peace was a fragile dream. The Council's fleet hadn't stopped searching. Elias knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. Over the following days, he repaired what he could of the station, using its communications relays to monitor nearby systems. The broadcasts from the inner colonies painted a grim picture. Propaganda about the human traitor who betrayed the Council for an alien cause. They've turned me into a monster, Elias said one night, his voice low. Then let them, Arya replied. Every empire needs a monster to remind it what it fears most. The truth. He smiled, shaking his head. You sound more human every day. And you, she said softly, sound more Valari. Their laughter was quiet, almost tender. The kind born from shared scars. Over time, they built something that resembled life. Elias scavenged food supplies and converted old machinery into a working hydro system. Arya taught Lyra the songs of her ancestors, soft and melodic tunes that filled the corridors with warmth. They lived in the in-between, two lost souls raising a child under the shadow of a galaxy that had tried to erase them. Every night, Elias would stand by the viewport watching the stars. Do you ever miss Earth? Arya would ask. He'd smile faintly. I miss what it was supposed to be, but I think I found something better. Then one night, a faint light appeared in the distance. A flash, rhythmic and deliberate. Elias frowned. That's no star, he said. He zoomed in on the screen, his heart sinking. It's a signal. Arya's expression turned cold. Council. He nodded. They're sweeping the outer sectors again. We're in their path. She stood beside him, her jaw set. We'll run again. No, he said quietly. We can't keep running. It's time to end this. Elias? She began, but he turned to her, his voice steady. If we run, they'll find us again. And this time they'll find others like us. We need to make sure they can't. He turned toward the console, entering a series of commands. This station has an old fusion core. If we overload it, we can send a burst through the Council's communication grid. A message they can't erase. Arya stared at him, realization dawning. You're going to tell the galaxy the truth. He nodded. They erased your people once. I won't let them do it again. She stepped closer, fear and admiration warring in her eyes. They'll trace it back to you. He smiled softly. Then at least they'll know my name meant something. She reached out, her hand resting on his chest. Elias, she whispered. If we survive this, promise me you'll stop trying to save the galaxy. He laughed quietly. Can't make that promise. Her eyes glistened. Then promise me you'll come back again. His hand rose to her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. Always. Hours later, as the Council fleet entered sensor range, the dying station came alive. Its ancient machinery roared for the first time in centuries. The signal burst across the void, encrypted, unstoppable. Every planet, every ship, every Council outpost received the same transmission. The truth about Valera, about the genocide, about the child with the gift of empathy, and the human who defied orders to save her. The Council tried to jam it, but the message spread faster than light, carried by countless relays. For the first time in generations, the galaxy remembered its crimes and its humanity. When the transmission ended, Elias looked at Arya one last time. It's done. And now? She asked softly. He smiled, a quiet fire in his eyes. Now we disappear again. She smiled back, her heart aching. Together this time. He nodded. Always. Outside, the Council fleet arrived, finding nothing but the echo of their own lies. The station was gone, the stars quiet once more. But across the galaxy, the story had already taken root. Of a human who defied an empire, an alien mother who found love in the ashes, and a child whose heart could heal the stars. And though history would never agree on what happened that day, the legend endured, whispered among traders, sung by refugees, written in the walls of forgotten worlds. She pleaded for her child's life, but humanity answered. The stars burned cold and clear, as if the universe itself had been reborn after the fire. Weeks had passed since the transmission that shattered the Galactic Council's illusion of order, but its echoes had not faded. Across countless worlds, citizens began to whisper the forbidden name, Captain Elias Ward. Some called him a traitor, others a savior, but for those who had suffered under the Council's shadow, he became something else entirely. Proof that humanity still carried light within it. Deep in the uncharted regions beyond the Orion Passage, far from any patrol or colony, a small ship drifted between twin nebulae, its hull patched and worn. Inside, warmth flickered again. Elias sat at the console, silent, watching the starlight ripple across the glass. Beside him, Arya leaned against the bulkhead, humming one of the ancient songs of Valera while Lyra slept in her lap. Her voice was soft, echoing like wind through glass. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, there was peace. Not safety, but peace, fragile and real. Elias broke the silence. "You know they'll come again," he said. His voice was calm, but beneath it, she could hear the weight of vigilance that never left him. Arya nodded slowly. "They'll always come. Empires don't die quietly." "And you?" he asked, turning toward her. "Do you regret any of this?" Her gaze stayed fixed on the sleeping child. "Regret? No. You gave her a future. That's all that matters." She smiled faintly, her silver eyes reflecting the dim light of the controls. "You humans always need a reason to fight. But sometimes, living is the victory." Elias chuckled softly. "That sounds like something you taught me." "Maybe I did," she said, her tone warm. "You've become quite Valari yourself." "And you," he replied, smiling. "Quite human." They shared a rare laugh, gentle, fleeting, but it felt like sunlight in the dark. For a while they said nothing. Then, quietly, Arya asked, "What happens now?" "We've burned every bridge. The Council will hunt us until the end of time." Elias leaned back, his gaze drifting to the stars beyond the glass. "Then we stay one step ahead. Find places where their laws mean nothing. Help who we can when we can. The truth we sent out, it's more than a story now. It's a spark." And sparks spread. Arya studied him, her voice soft but certain. "You really think one act of mercy can change the galaxy?" He looked at her, and for the first time in years, his smile held no bitterness. "No, but it can remind the galaxy that it can be changed." The words lingered in the quiet, warm air of the cockpit. Lyra stirred, blinking awake, her small voice breaking the silence. "Mom, where are we going?" Arya brushed her daughter's hair gently. "Somewhere new," she said softly. "Somewhere safe." The child yawned, half asleep. "Will Elias come too?" Arya smiled faintly, glancing at him. "He's not going anywhere." The little girl smiled, drifting back into dreams. Elias met Arya's gaze across the dim room, and in that look was everything that had gone unsaid. The battles fought, the pain endured, the love they had found between the ashes. But the galaxy was not done with them. The Council had fractured. News had spread through outer colonies, uprisings kindling like wildfire. Ships bearing the Council's insignia had begun to vanish, overtaken by fleets that no longer obeyed orders. Former soldiers laid down their weapons. Old enemies began to speak again. And somewhere among those whispered revolutions, one story continued to grow. The tale of a human who defied extinction, of an alien mother who saved a dying child, and of a bond that crossed species and silenced hatred. Some believed they were dead, others believed they were myth. But to those who dreamed of freedom, they were hope incarnate. One evening, as their ship passed through the Reflection Nebula near the edge of the Perseus Arm, Arya stood before the viewport, lost in thought. "The galaxy is changing," she murmured. Elias joined her, folding his arms. "Because of you," he said. She shook her head. "Because of us. You gave it something it had forgotten. A choice. And what about you? He asked quietly. What do you want now? She turned toward him, her eyes soft but steady. I want to stop running. I want Lyra to grow up in a world where she doesn't have to hide. I want her to see what you saw in us, humanity. Elias smiled faintly. Then we'll build it, piece by piece. Outside, the nebula shimmered in hues of gold and blue, casting their faces in soft light. Arya stepped closer, her voice low. You once said you'd find me in another life. Maybe you already did. He met her gaze, his expression quiet and raw. Maybe I never lost you. For a moment, the stars disappeared, replaced by the warmth between them. Their hands met, a human and a Valari, the first bridge between two species once torn apart by fear. In that touch was everything the Council could never erase. Defiance, tenderness, and the simple truth that love, once found, could rewrite galaxies. Days turned into weeks, and the legend of Elias and Arya began to spread beyond their reach. Pirates told stories of a ghost ship that appeared during raids, saving colonists before vanishing into the void. Refugees spoke of a blue-skinned woman and a human captain who brought food to dying worlds and medicine to forgotten colonies. No one could prove their existence, yet every world they touched began to change. On frontier planets, murals appeared on stone walls. One of a mother shielding her child while a man in worn armor stood beside her, his arm outstretched toward the stars. Beneath the image, the same words appeared in every tongue. She pleaded for her child's life, but humanity answered. Years later, under the twin suns of a quiet world, Lyra would grow tall and strong, her gift blooming like dawn. When she spoke, those who listened found peace. When she touched another's hand, their anger faded. The Council would fall not through war, but through the awakening of empathy, the very gift they once tried to destroy. And through it all, stories of her guardians would persist, like constellations drawn in fire and love. Far away, in the endless silence between stars, two figures stood once more at a viewport, older now, their hair touched by time. Arya rested her head on Elias's shoulder, her voice a whisper. Do you ever wonder what they'll say about us? He smiled faintly. They'll say we were impossible. And wrong, she teased gently. And stubborn, he added. And human, she said. He turned to her, brushing a strand of silver hair behind her ear. No, he murmured. We were something better, we were both. Outside, the universe stretched on, infinite, unending, alive. And though their names might fade with time, their story would not. It would ripple through space and memory, carried in every act of kindness, every defiance of cruelty, every human who dared to care. The galaxy had forgotten what it meant to feel, but because one human stepped forward when no one else would, it remembered again. And somewhere, among the stars, the legend lived on, two hearts beating as one across the silence, a promise that no empire could silence. Humanity endures. If you enjoyed this HFY sci-fi story of love, defiance, and redemption, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more cinematic tales where humanity rises beyond the stars.